Hi, this is Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. Today, I want to talk about a question of how do you know your mixes are good enough? How do you know your productions are good enough? How do you know you are good enough to be doing this? Music, audio, whatever your role is in the whole world of music and audio production, how do you know if what you're doing is good enough? And how do you know if you're good enough to be doing it? I'm going to give you, I think is the answer key to that. And it's going to be a pretty simple one. And I'm going to get to that towards the end of the episode. And I think on the way, we're going to go through some kind of weird places. And I hope you bear with me for some of this stuff because I think we have to go to some unusual places to answer that question. I'll also give you some really practical ideas about knowing when your mixes are good enough, when your production is good enough, and whether you're good enough to be doing this for a living, for a career, or even just as a serious vocation that you're going to have the kind of results you want from. And we talk a lot on this show about how to get better at things, right? How to improve. Like what I do as a mastering engineer is help people put the final finishing touches on their mixes, on their music, on their productions. So we often talk about how to perfect, how to improve, how to get better. But sometimes we can focus a little bit too much on that, and it can end up holding you back. There can be some themes in this that I've touched on in the past. We did a great episode that was pretty popular called How to Finish Your Mixes and Faster. But this isn't just going to be a rehashing of that. And we're going to look at it from a different angle. And I'm going to give you a different set of answers today than I gave you back then about how to know whether your mixers are good enough or whether you're cut out to be doing this. To get there, I want to be able to tell you just a couple of stories. Because sometimes in order to figure out what's going on in our craft that's so deeply personal that we can't get away from, we need to step back and look at it from a different angle, in a different context, to be able to see what's going on in our own productions, in our own lives, with some distance, with some emotional maturity. And I can tell you that I know right now that so many of you out there haven't put things out because you've thought they aren't good enough. And you've been held back because you've been worried about criticism and comments and critiques, or just worried about apathy, about putting your best out there and no one seems to care or notice. And that's hard. It's really hard to go out there and scream your heart out and sing your lungs out into the void. It's really hard to go out there and kind of bare your soul to have people laugh and jeer at you and have negative comments about what you're doing. It's hard to show people the best of your craft that you've been working at and have them say, it's not that great. And that kind of fear holds a lot of people back. So how do you confidently go out there and just put out records? Because you know you have to put out music for people to hear it. You know you have to do it again and again to get good at it. So how do you know if it's good enough? Because even if it's good enough, right, you're still going to get criticism. You're still going to get negative feedback, right? There's some of your favorite artists out there who you think make beautiful stuff, like tear-jerking stuff. It like moves you to feeling, right? It brings the goosebumps out of your forearms. It, brings tears welling up in your eyes. Some people are like, that kind of sucks, right? There's some people that hate your favorite music. So when is it good enough? I kind of don't feel like doing a sponsor section today, but I'm gonna, because it's been a weird week. I've spent my Monday and Tuesday this week really distracted by what's going on in the world. It's not just been a weird week. It's been a weird couple of months. I'm talking to you right now at the very beginning of June 2020. And this is one of those times where there's just like seminal shifts going on in the world, seismic shifts, right? Where patterns of human behavior from here out the next 10 years are going to be different than the way they were before. And I'm not talking about social distancing. I'm talking about a lot of other things. Where people live, where they decide to live, what kind of work they decide to do, what's important to them, what they care about, all sorts of stuff. is going to shift. And the world that we look back in 10 years from now is going to be very different than the world that we look back on today, 10 years going back. So it's a weird time. But in weird times, you still got to create stuff. And you still got to put out positive stuff and kind of notice what's going on in the world that works and makes sense and is worth noticing. And you making music is that. You're not Nero, fiddling while Rome burns, right? You making music to connect with other people, to help them kind of evaluate the situation they're in, to help them feel less alone, to help them soothe the beast inside when it needs to be soothed, or rile it up when it needs to be riled up. That stuff is important. So I hope you keep on creating in these weird and unusual times. And I got to tell you, weird and unusual times are the best time to try something new, to start a new business, to get better at what you've been meaning to get better at, to pivot, to change your approach. I mean, right now, beginning of June 2020, everything that you decide to do from here could be different. And the whole rest of your life could be different because of it. So in the spirit of noticing cool and awesome things that can be noticed, I'm going to do the sponsor shout out section because we have sponsors on this podcast. And one thing I want to tell you about is the mic I'm talking to right now is a Black Hole by Jay-Z microphones. And the cool thing I want to say about it is that there's going to be a huge discount on it coming up. If you're looking to buy a microphone to expand your arsenal, this is going to be hugely discounted for I think it's the next week. Go to SonicScoop.com, sign up for the newsletter, and we'll tell you more details. I'll try to put in the links down below. This is going to be discounted for half off. And you can hear a shootout I did of this microphone compared to a couple others right here on the YouTube channel. I'll try to link to that as well. Another cool thing, a brand I really like a lot for plugins, Sound Toys, are sponsors on the podcast. And it's worth noticing that they make cool stuff. And I want you to make cool stuff. Just because the world is weird right now and there's upheaval right now doesn't mean you should stop doing cool stuff. Maybe it means the cool stuff you do and the music you create is informed by the world around you, and it should be. And, tense times can make for great art, and tense times make us need, I think, great art even more. So I hope you're making some, and I hope today's episode prepares you to make more and better great art. So how do you know if it's good enough? How do you know if you're good enough to do this? We'll get there, I promise. We're getting closer and closer. But I want to give you one of these stories that is going to help remove you from your context so you can see it better. My wife right now, she is starting a jewelry business. She was a music professional like me for many years. She played flute professionally and then kind of, stopped doing that when our first daughter was being born. And now she's coming back into it, and she had one of those moments where it was like, if I had to do it all over again, I'd love to try starting my own business, making jewelry. It was something she was never interested in growing up. She felt like she couldn't be around jewelry. She wasn't the kind of person who wore jewelry. She didn't come from the kind of family that could afford jewelry. That kind of thing. So there's a whole bunch of emotional baggage. And I got to tell you, a lot of people who do really well in music have emotions wrapped up in music and what it means to be musical or be a musician. And often people who do well in a field kind of overcome some past emotional baggage they had about that field. And I got to tell you, I have so much respect to people who come from music to music from the outside, who didn't go through the I went to music school path, because so many of those people bring such meaning to it and such focus on what's really important, what's really valuable, and to really understand the mind of a consumer and a music listener in the way that some academic musicians don't. And I know this. I went to school with a lot of academic musicians, and not just the classically trained jazzy kinds. I mean, like the indie rock, indie pop, experimental kind of academic musicians as well, who sometimes lose sight of audiences. This isn't to devalue what experimental people do and virtuosic people do, but it's to also showcase what people from outside formal music learning bring to music. And it's amazing stuff. And I love to see people in any career coming from the outside, because they keep it fresh and they keep the focus on the end listener. And it's really frustrating for my wife to start this jewelry business, because she's going through the same things that we all go through, like when you're new to something, right? Is it good enough? How do I know if it's good enough compared to everything else that's available out there. Who am I to be making this stuff? And it's tricky, and I've been there. Even in starting doing this stuff, starting a podcast, starting writing articles about audio, music production, which I've been doing for more than a decade. It was tricky in the beginning. When I launched my own first personal blog called Trust Me, I'm a Scientist on music and audio production, I didn't have a comment section on it because I couldn't handle comments from people. And it wasn't just because I was, too worried about being criticized. It's actually kind of the opposite. I didn't mind being criticized because I would go in there in the comments and duel it out with people, right? And you might see if you follow the YouTube channel, I do that here. If you comment, I'll go and interact with people. I couldn't be trusted around a comment section because I took everyone really seriously, even people I probably shouldn't take seriously. So I didn't have one for a while, in a way, because the feedback from an audience was too much for me to handle. And that is true for so many people getting started in music. If you actually start getting the feedback and getting noticed for the music you do, it's a whole new world if you haven't experienced that before. But you get used to it like all things, and you get good at it over time. Now I kind of love comments, even the bad ones. So leave your comments down below. I'll probably talk to you if you say something interesting or ask a question. And if I don't have time, maybe I'll address it later on another podcast episode. So long story short, my wife is launching this jewelry business, and she's listening to a meditation, one of these, meditations. You ever try the Calm app? It's actually really good. They have the nighttime stories. I love to listen to an audiobook when I go to sleep. I tend to listen to stuff on my Audible account. Now I'm going on but she listens to some of these meditations, and one of them came up, and it was you're good enough already. You don't need to fix anything. You don't need to improve what you're doing. Everything's okay. You're good. You don't need to fix who you are. And it kind of made her a little annoyed, right? And I can relate to that. I've felt that way in the past. We're focusing on trying to make things better and making things good enough and making things as great as they can be. So an audience will care and people will recognize our brilliance or whatever, right? And she was pissed off that this was the advice given to her in this meditation, that, hey, just accept where you are and you don't need to improve everything. I'm trying to improve everything to launch my business. I got to get my website going, my store going, my advertising, marketing materials going, making the jewelry good enough, all the stuff. And she was just who are you telling me I'm already good enough? And I get that. But I also think there's some tremendous value in that perspective. And it's something we talked through. We went for a walk in the middle of the day because I can do that with my job. Isn't that crazy? I've engineered my life so I can just take a walk in the middle of the day around the neighborhood randomly with my wife and talk about the things that are bothering us. That's something that I've structured into my life. It didn't happen by accident. And if little bits of freedom like that sound attractive to you, you can have them. You can engineer your life so that you get to work on the things you want to do and have the kind of lifestyle you want to have. So we talked through it, and of course, the analogy for me is jiu-jitsu. If you've heard me at this podcast, I've probably mentioned jiu-jitsu as an analogy a few times because it works so well. And jiu-jitsu, for those of you who don't know, it's a sport, an activity where you try to choke out your best friends and or break their arms. But they tap, so you don't actually choke them unconscious or break their arms. But it's a really interesting physical puzzle. It's a martial art and a combat sport, and it is, both a great workout and great for your mind. But it's also great for bringing into focus life's problems. And I've got to tell you, when I started doing jiu-jitsu as a white belt, not very long ago now, I'm not even 2 years into it. But when I first started, I was terrible at it. Really, really bad. And I'm kind of old. I'm in my late 30s now. I'm closer to 40 than I am to 30. Let's just say it that way. And I'm fairly fit, but not quite as fit as some of these really young guys who've been doing this for a long time, who are in amazing shape, and go in there and get my ass beat every single day, like multiple times in a few minute period, tapping because I would be choked to death if I didn't do so, right? Again and again and again. Yet I kept on showing up 2 times a week, then 3 times a week, then 4 times a week. Because I think I ultimately accepted where I was. And where I was is, I'm not very good at this. I'm coming to this kind of old, not in like amazing young athlete shape. And I'm going to lose a lot. Like constantly. I'm going to get my ass handed to me constantly. And that's okay. That doesn't need to be fixed. I'm good enough as a person, even though I'm going to lose constantly and I'm not amazing at this. And only by accepting that, only by accepting where you are right now, which is maybe it's, I don't have the audience yet. I'm not confident in my mixing chops yet. My songs are too long and aimless and people don't give me great feedback on them. I barely even know how to play guitar and I want to learn. Or I'm starting to develop in this, but I can't finish. I can't finish my mixes. Wherever you are on this stuff, you just have to accept that and recognize that that doesn't need to be fixed necessarily. And it's okay that you're in that phase that you're in. And this is one of the big problems that I have with college. It messes people up when they go to school for music and audio production. And I had a whole podcast episode where I talk about this. And that is, it makes people not realize where they are in the process. Like people graduate from college, they think, I've learned everything I should know and now I'm good enough. It's like, no, you're not. Well, chances are, no, you're not. A few people graduate, they hit the ground running, but they were good enough before they graduated and they were getting good enough for reasons that are not just school, but the other things that they were doing in addition to school. But in general, it's like, you don't graduate, now you're good enough and now you start. It's like, no, you need to, at that point, recognize where you are. You're no longer a student. You're an unemployed person. An unemployed person who still has years more learning to do and years more doing to do, because chances are you spent way too much time in college listening to people yak, like you're listening to me talk right now. And listening to people talk can absolutely be life-changing. And I hope that there are elements in today's episode that are life-changing for you. If you've gotten this far, maybe you look back at this and say, I don't remember everything you said, but I remember it changed the way I approach things. Hopefully I can have that impact on you. I don't know if I will, but if I do, let me know. And that's one of the big problems with people graduating from college for music is that they don't come out there with that acceptance of where you are right now. So I want to tell you that right now, how do you know you're good enough? You are good enough. You're absolutely good enough to be doing this. Now, that doesn't mean you're so good at recording or mixing or arranging or writing songs that the whole world's going to care. But you're good enough to keep doing this. You're good enough to find, like, you're fine the way that you are. You don't need to fix a million things and become great at everything to be good enough either to release music. Because every single one of us has favorite records that we absolutely love, that we know are not extremely well-produced, amazing sounding records. Maybe you can write some of your favorites in the comments down here below if you're on the YouTube version, or just email me at podcast@sonicscoop.com if you want to share yours. I'm going to share one. Beck's One Foot in the Grave. Oh, one of my favorite records ever. Sounds terrible. Awfully produced. I mean, it's not even produced. It's like a 4-track record. Beautiful, gorgeous record. Beck's One Foot in the Grave. If you're a Beck fan, you haven't heard that record, there's something wrong with you. It's a great record. Other things too. I mean, I was a big Nirvana fan growing up. Probably my favorite Nirvana record was Incesticide, which was all their B-sides, all the stuff that wasn't good enough. Right? There's so many things. There's a lot of people who love Robert Johnson, a lot of these old-timey, Delta blues artists where it's like recording sounds terrible. Then actually the rhythm isn't that good in a lot of ways, and that's not precise. But they change people's lives. Leadbelly, that's one. For you Nirvana fans probably know Leadbelly too, right? So there's so many things that we know aren't good enough that are amazing. So you don't have to be great at everything right now to keep going and to get good enough. Who you are right now is fine, as long as you have the interest and desire to genuinely connect with an audience. And this is one of the big problems for people in music or any creative field, is that it becomes so much about their performance. How well am I performing? Am I doing this well enough? How good am I? Right? But it's not about that. Making great art that resonates with people and people remember is about connecting with the other person who's actually listening to this stuff. And if you have a desire to connect with someone emotionally and communicate emotion to them, because that's what music is. Music is a form of communication. What are we communicating in music? We're communicating emotion. We're making people's hair stand on its end right here. Maybe it's here. We're making wetness come to people's eyes because we understand them. They understand us. And there's some connection between us in what can sometimes seem like a very lonely and confusing world. Somebody else gets you, and they tell you about it in music. They don't tell you about it in words, specifically, literally, because that's not who they are. That's not the thing that they're great at. That's not what they do. They tell you about it through music. And it's a form of connection and communication that can potentially break through language barriers. It doesn't necessarily need to be translated. And when I say language barriers, I don't just mean this guy speaks Spanish and this guy speaks French and this guy speaks English. Those aren't the only kind of language barriers that exist. We think in different terms, even if we speak the same language technically. And music can break that stuff down and blow it apart. Music has probably done more for the actual advancement of civil rights in America and the voluntary and peaceful integration of people from different races and different ethnic backgrounds than anything else. Than practically any law you could pass. And I'm not saying that laws that take away restrictions aren't a good thing. Like, it is good to get rid of Jim Crow laws and all that stuff. Absolutely. Is that necessary? Absolutely, right? One of the types of laws right now that's under fire, and well should be, is qualified immunity for police officers. I think that would probably be a good thing to get rid of. This isn't a political show, so I don't want to go into politics. But the things that actually bring people together peacefully, voluntarily, get them on the same page, and get people seeing the world from each other's perspective, it's been art, and particularly music, in the 20th century. This brought people from different backgrounds together. It's happened in the past, and it keeps on happening today. So I just want to give you some encouragement in a weird time. That A, music matters, creating matters, making good art that actually shares good values with other people and helps connect people and make them focus on what's important and meaningful and makes them actually notice the important things that are going on in their lives right in front of them. And that doesn't always mean the big things. Sometimes it means the small and private things. If you can make music that can bring that kind of stuff into focus and that can touch people and make them realize that certain things in life are important, then you win. Then what you're doing is good enough. And I don't care if there's too much or too little 4K in your recordings, or whether or not I can hear the kick drum or if the hi-hat's too loud. I don't care. Now, that said, you bring something to be mastered, I'm going to help you work on all that stuff. Not because that's the most important thing, but because it can remove distractions, remove as many of those imperfections as we can that get in the way of communicating emotion, while leaving in place, and this is just as important, leaving in place those imperfections that should be there and need to be there in order for that emotion and humanity to come across. And that number 2 is just as important as that number 1. And sometimes chasing perfection too hard will make you iron out the idiosyncrasies and imperfections that should be there in your art. And I'm sure that you have some favorite records that you can tell me about in the comments, or email me at podcast@sonicscoop.com, where you can tell me about imperfections that made you love a record or made you love an artist even more. So here's the answer to that question. I said I would answer from the beginning, which is, how do you know? How do you know when your mix is good enough? How do you know if you're good enough to be doing this? How do you know if your song is good enough? How do you know if your production is good enough? How do you know if your mix is good enough? And there's one key answer to that. And that is, did it make somebody feel something? Can you sit back as an end listener, pretend that you didn't make this? And when you hear it, do you feel something? Do your hairs stand up a little bit on your head? Or do you get flushed in your ear or in your cheeks? Is there something behind your eyes where you start feeling pressure? Is there something in your arms? Are there goosebumps? Is there a wave, a flush that comes over your shoulders? I don't know what it is. It could be what some people refer to as a brain boner, right? It's this semi-intellectual but semi-visceral feeling of not just, oh, this is good, but oh, this is good. And if that happens, then your mix is good enough and your song is good enough, your production is good enough. And if that doesn't happen, something went wrong. And I don't know if getting the right EQ curve for your final master is going to fix it in the case of the latter. Maybe it can help. Sometimes getting the right mix, getting the right EQ curve on the final master, getting the right amount of compression can help break through new levels of emotional experience. Maybe something is supposed to feel really powerful and intense and it doesn't. And then that last touches that the mixing engineer and the mastering engineer put on brings out the intensity and bombast that's missing for that emotional connection to happen, and they can amp it up and make that emotional connection happen more for you. Or maybe it's the other way. Maybe there's supposed to be this somber, mellow, softened vibe to things, and maybe EQing things to make sure that's not too bright, that it feels a little bit more luscious. Maybe that's going to help. And maybe those mixed choices and those mastering choices can help enhance or reveal that potential for emotional connection. But that potential for emotional connection should have been there the entire time. And mixing and mastering should either bring that out even more so, or uncover it and reveal it. Or maybe, if you're really lucky, multiply it. But as long as you can do that, connect with people emotionally without the production becoming distracting because maybe it falls too flat, maybe it's not loud enough, maybe it doesn't have enough low, and all that stuff, you can remove some of those issues to make it even easier to connect. Then that's what the final mix and the final master is about. But sometimes things can be really lo-fi sounding, and sometimes a great mastering engineer or maybe a great mixer is going to say, hey man, the rough and dirty recordings that you did are awesome, and like I feel something when I listen to them, and what I want to make sure I don't do is like steamroll and iron out everything and cut off all the rough edges so there's nothing left. And we tried to make this really pristine sounding thing artificially out of your record. And we try to shoehorn it into sounding like other commercial releases instead of saying, just let this thing be quirky and weird. And within how far we can take this, we'll take it. But we're going to let it be it, and we're going to focus on the emotional connection. So that is the ultimate arbiter for whether your mix is good enough. whether your master is good enough? Did it make you feel something when you're listening to it as an end listener? And it's not just the mix and the master that's going to do that. It's going to be the performance. It's going to be the writing. It's going to be the arranging. They're this symbiotic thing. They all go together, right? There's not one of them that's so much more important than the others. And how do you know if you're good enough to do this? Well, you are. You're a human being. I mean, even if you're tone deaf, you can probably learn to be less tone deaf. That would be the problem. Like if you have absolutely zero relative pitch, you can't sing in tune at all. I mean, it might be such an insurmountable obstacle that you're not going to become a singer or a really great instrumentalist. But then there's some singers that even make that work. I don't even know if can Bob Dylan really carry a tune? I don't know. You tell me. Maybe you have a really annoying voice. So does Neil Young, and I effing love Neil Young. You know, maybe you don't have the musical aptitude. Well, maybe you'll make a good mixing engineer or mastering engineer. This is what Tony Maserati would say about his career. He went to Berkeley studying music and was told, you're not very good at this music thing. So he became a mixing engineer. So if you love music and you want to work with it day in and day out, and you want to structure a life where you can do that, you can do that. All you need to be good enough to do this is 1, really, really care about and really, really be interested and turned on by it so much that you want to do it all the time. 2, figure out how to structure your life and work with your best attributes to find ways where you can do it again and again and again and again. Maybe that's professionally, maybe it's not professionally. Maybe it's just an important hobby to you. And number 3, and maybe this is the most important one out of the 3, is that you have to actually care about connecting to an end audience. Well, that's what's going to make you great, at least. And that's what's going to make you be remembered. That's what's going to make people care about your music, that you're actually using it to try to talk to them, to try to communicate with them, to try to have a virtual relationship with them. And that can be people in your own household. I got to tell you, I make a huge impact in the world through my singing. No one's ever heard me sing publicly or on a record. I've done some backgrounds and stuff here and there. But, I'm actually not terrible at it. But there's one person who's heard me sing a bunch of times. My 2.5-year-old daughter. She hears me sing all the time. And when I sing to her, it has a huge impact on her life. I am like Nat King Mother effing Cole to my 2.5-year-old daughter. I have a huge impact on her life when I sing to her. It's dramatic. Sometimes she's not in the mood, but when she is, man, that's touching somebody. And maybe you don't have someone like that close in your life where you're going to have that unusually profound bond between you and a 2-year-old who's like your kid. But there might be other people in your life, whether it's friends or family or brothers or sisters or cousins or compadres or roommates or people in your art clique or people in just your circle of friends and influence. And if you make it about not just your performance and how well you're performing, you have to care about that. But if you can make it about, I'm going to tickle you. I'm going to remind you that life is interesting and worth living. And that's amazing. And then if you can do that to 1 or 2 or 3 people around you, you could build a bigger platform and a bigger megaphone and do that to more and more people. It's time for me to wrap up here. We've been going a little while on this one theme. This has been a Zero Edits podcast, so there's been a lot more pausing than usual because I'm kind of thinking this stuff through as I go. I usually prepare a lot more, try to make things concise. Been doing a lot of 15-minute episodes lately. Not this week. I've been distracted this week. A lot of people posting a lot of different things on social media. One of my favorites was something along the lines of, if you've seen those black background motifs, it was create, don't hate. Something along those lines. And I've got to say, becoming great at anything starts with accepting where you are. And it also starts with gratitude. And gratitude is not something people want to hear about when they're having a really difficult time. I know, I've been there. But you've got to start with gratitude, because gratitude helps you improve. And if you're grateful for where you are, and if you say, I'm not only good enough, just being who I am, flawed as I am, but I'm grateful for all of the obstacles I have in front of me, for everything that's gone wrong in my life and everything that's gone right in my life. I'm grateful for them because they've made me who I am today, and they've put me in the situation I'm in today. And the situation I'm in today is one where from here on out, I'm going to be improving. And I know that I can improve because I've accepted where I am, and I'm grateful for where I am right now. You get so much more done with gratitude. And that sounds so annoying to people, especially when they're in the mood to change the world and reveal all the things that are wrong with the world. But gratitude applies to anything. Let's say, argument's sake, I'll pull a hypothetical out of thin air. Let's say you were going to have a protest. I don't know where I got this idea from, but let's say you're going to have a protest. If you start with gratitude for the fact that so many people showed up, you're going to be a lot more effective. Like, your goal is to change the world and make it better. But if you start with gratitude for everything that's right with the world, and the fact that, like, oh my God, a lot of people showed up and also care, and you start with gratitude for that fact, you can change so much more than if you don't notice that, or if you resent it. You can say, I want to change things. There's like violence in the world happening around me right now. There's things that have to end. There's injustices. There are in the world, absolutely. But how much further do you get by first expressing gratitude of, oh my God, if I look back at history, how incredibly far we've come, how incredibly peaceful and kind and understanding to each other we are relative to where we've been in history. Because it was not long ago that we were killing each other by the millions over slights much smaller and more imagined than what occurs today. And to be grateful for the fact that we've come so incredibly far, and that our tolerance for injustice has gone down so far that we can be looking to make the improvements that we're looking to make today. That's amazing, because when you start thinking that way, you start going to that spiel of, it's the current year, right? It's 2020, it's the current year, and we have this and this and this, and we've come all this way, but we're still doing this? Man, that is so much more powerful than everything sucks, everything's terrible, everything's horrible. We should feel horrible about it. Because if you don't start with gratitude, then kind of all you can do is destroy. And it's so much easier to destroy than to create. And creating things, good art, a new life for yourself, it starts with accepting where you are, accepting who you are. Your limitations are okay. Yeah, you're going to improve things, but first accept where you are. And you can improve things from there. Because if you don't accept where you are, you're never going to improve as much as you should. Because you never took the time to say, I'm so far away from where I want to be, and I accept that, and it's okay. And once you accept that, and you're okay with you being so far away from where you want to end up, can you actually be realistic and take the steps you need to improve yourself? And if you just, it's so ironic, if you just focus on improving yourself, you're not going to improve, because you're never going to take a moment to realize how far from your end vision you truly are, and you're never going to allow yourself to be comfortable with how far you are from where you want to be in the end. And you have to get comfortable with that. You have to get comfortable with how far away you are from where you want to be to get to where you want to be. So you have to accept yourself, and you have to accept your flaws and your limitations and how far from where you want to be you are. And this is the beautiful thing. To make great art that's going to resonate with people, you don't need to get all the way there. You don't need to get all the way to where you want to be. You can tell people the story of where you are right now in your journey, of a person who's not complete, not finished, not done, or a person who hasn't arrived. Which of those two stories is more relatable? The person who perfected everything and now is showing you their perfection, or the story of someone who's a human being just like you, trying to muddle through and get better every step of the way? And whenever they get better, they get excited because they want to share it. Because that could be you, if you accept where you are in your journey right now. And don't try to be this perfect vision you have for who you could be, but just accept who you are now and put out the music you can put out right now as that person. And try to connect with someone at the other end who's also imperfect and who isn't going to agree with you on everything and who might occasionally get annoyed at you. Connect with them. And then gratitude. Being grateful for the opportunities you have, because you can talk about how this guy had all of these advantages. He came from the rich family with the trust fund, or, yeah, it'd be easy if I was in your shoes. You can do that. You can compare yourself to all of how easy other people had it. You can do that. It's not going to work out very well for you. You're not going to go very far. Why not focus on the people who had to overcome even more adversity than you? And why not be grateful for all the advantages that you have compared to them? Maybe you can even wish that you had more adversity like they did. And that's a trap. You don't want to go down that road either, pretending your life's worse than it is so that you can have some sob stories that you can and make insincere art that way. You got to accept the actual advantages you were given, because I got to tell you, I've met people who grew up with a ton of advantages and they have a struggle with life too. Some people who have everything handed to them, and the battles that they have with drug abuse, loneliness, not knowing whether people are really their friends. They start the studio and it doesn't make any money and no one hears their music anyway. And maybe they're chasing approval their whole lives. Like, no matter what, the best of circumstances, the worst of circumstances, we can all have a hard run of it. So starting with gratitude for where you're at is huge if you want to change the world. There's a saying, and I can't remember who said it first, but it's the most positive kind of haunting that it haunts me. It is, start with gratitude, because people who are grateful for what they have tend to be given more to be grateful for. It's extremely powerful. So I guess those are the only things I want to say to you. What you're doing is good enough if you're trying to and can actually emotionally connect with other people. You are good enough to pursue this from wherever you are right now if you're going to dedicate yourself to it. And you've got a lot to be grateful for. And it's okay to recognize that even when times are tough and you see all of the bad things that are happening. And being grateful, and sometimes you have to be grateful quietly, depending on the circumstances. But starting with that gratitude is going to help you change the world more than not having any gratitude and just tearing down everything. Just destroying is easy. You want to destroy yourself, have at it. It's the easiest thing you can do. How easy, I'm looking at a computer right now, right here in front of me, how easy it would be to destroy this computer and this camera and these lights. You could just destroy it all. Destroying is really easy. Creating is really hard. And it's really important. And it's really beautiful. So I hope you're out there not hating and creating and having whatever impact you can on the world in whatever way you think and you truly believe is positive. I'm not going to tell you what that is and what that means for you, but you're going to discover, at least I hope you do. Thanks for hanging out with me for this week's episode of the Sonic Scoop podcast. This has been Justin Colletti of Sonic Scoop. Sounds weird to say it, but hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps. And talk to me. Shoot me comments in the comments below. Shoot me an email at podcast@sonicscoop.com. If you want this mic, it's going on sale. Giving one away as of today. Contest on this ends today. SonicScoop.com/contest. A new one starting today. You can always go there to win some free stuff. But this mic going to be going on sale 50% off. Black Hole by Jay-Z. You can check it out. I just did a video about it. Big thanks to Sound Toys 2, one of my favorite plugin makers. Big thanks to you for listening to this podcast. If you want to get more technical with me, I've got workshops and stuff. Feels weird to be promoting stuff right now, but I'm going to do it. Because you still got to create. And if you want to get better at your craft from where you are right now, having accepted where you are right now, check out SonicScoop.com/mixhabits. Free workshop on really learning from people who do this really, really well. You want to go deeper into mastering? SonicScoop.com/mastering101. That's my primer on mastering. And check out more stuff on this channel. Thanks for spending this much time with me. I hope it was useful for you. Once more, it's been Justin Colletti of Sonic Scoop. Thanks for hanging out with me. Go there and create. Go out there and create. Have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your week. See you next time.